The earliest sign of testosterone dropping is a little bit more anxiety and depression. We're seeing a lot of young males now have a lot of anxiety. At least 30% of men under the age of 30 have low testosterone. A great study out of Stanford that did show that if you could catch people earlier and treat them ongoing, the benefits were more substantial, particularly for heart. Sometimes you can do things to just stimulate their own function. So a younger guy, you don't have to give testosterone. Sometimes you can just give them supplements or secretagogues, things that cause their own testicles to just work a little bit better. I treated myself based on my labs. And when my labs were showing this is actually a sub-therapeutic level of estrogen for your brain and for your bone, then I started replacing. So I do think it's important to look at your hormones and see, because you feel fine. You feel great.
Have you found that it really is important to supplement at some point for a woman? What's the latest trend? 1 minute you're taping your mouth shut. The next you're supposed to sip a nightly glass of wine or swear it off. Egg yolks are the heroes, then they're the villains. Peptides, weighted vest, creatine for women, the noise never ends. So how do we know what actually works? I am Juliet Hahn, and this is Don't Die Curious. In every episode, I sit down with doctors, innovators, and everyday legends to separate the facts from the hype and uncover what really sharpens the mind, strengthens the body, and fuels the spirit. Stay curious. One good question can change your life forever. So this is Juliet Hahn, and I have a very special guest, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. How are you?
I'm great, Juliet. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, I'm going to introduce you a little bit. So you're the co-founder and CMO of Boulder Longevity Institute. Your IG is DRYURTH, like your last name. And Yep, Dr. Yurth. And as a double board certified physician in physical medicine and rehabilitation and anti-aging regenerative medicine, Dr. Yurth has more than 30 years of clinical experience and continues to stay at the forefront of orthopedics, cellular medicine, regenerative medicine, and the future of aging. Now, I have so many questions because I would love to start. We met each other at Octane in California.
Yeah.
You were speaking. Danielle came up and texted. Actually, she texted and she said, I love this woman that's on the podium. I need you, Juliet, to find her and talk to her. She is like my spirit animal. She is everything. You're going to love her too. And I was like, great. You were getting tea and I was at our booth and I jumped up and was like, I have to come and say hi because I hear you're an incredible person. And our co-founder gets these feelings about people and I usually have the same, and we go from there. And so that's how we first got connected. And then someone in your office had a Mohs procedure.
Yeah, Kristen is one of our client care coordinators, had a Mohs on her forearm. She's young, she's 28, right? You know, so perfect skin, but she keeps getting basal cell carcinomas. And she had a Mohs that turned out to be, they kept like just taking more of it and more of it and more of it and more of it. And then the guy tried to close it and it was horrific, right? It was horrible looking. So it was gratuitous, right? Like you guys had a booth there. I'm like, oh my God, I need these people like right now in my life, So it was like everything aligning to bring us together, right? And we all got along so well. And honestly, Danielle and Rachel have been huge because this thing was ghastly. I mean, it was this big, gaping, non-healing wound on her forehead that has healed up so nicely with Rachel. And of course, she's got another one here they just did and another one here. So we're going to keep the Rachel people going for a while.
Poor thing. But I mean, it just, again, one of those amazing interactions where we didn't know it was supposed to happen and it happened.
That's strange, right? When these people come into your life all at the right time and you're like, and there was this instant connection. Like Danny and I were sitting there talking like, oh my God, this is like this instant connection. So it's really cool.
It's really powerful. I mean, it really is powerful. And the universe, God, has very interesting ways of putting people together. So what I'm excited about, because everything that you do, it's really interesting. As I started with the company, I don't have a medical background. I come from the communications world, podcasting, doing stuff on the red carpet, interviewing, really connecting with people. That's my superpower. And, there's a whole story, as I explained to you a little bit in the beginning, of how I came to work for Fat Tech. And there's so much in medicine that I have been wronged in my past that I kind of had built up this little bit of a, like kind of an angry part.
Yeah.
So I really went to homeopathy and that angle. And I know that, for traditional medicine, there's always, a time and place, but I really love this longevity. And I've been the last probably 19 years now, 15 years, even with my kids, have always followed this kind of non-traditional path that a lot of people in my worlds don't really understand. So I don't really talk about it. It's like, I know my body really well. I know my kids really well. I mean, I know myself to the point where I used to know when I ovulated, I could feel it. I could feel things in my body. So it just was very intuitive me to going down this path. So regenerative medicine, before I knew what regenerative medicine was and kind of this longevity path, was always something that was very innate in me. So when we come across doctors like yourself and the knowledge that you have, and especially on, because I'm a woman, the woman health side really, spiked my curiosity. It's like, and Danielle also is the same. So that's one of the things that we really connect with. So I would love for you to tell the listeners a little bit about your journey, a little bit, take us back. This is one of my favorite things, is kind of to go back into like where you started as a kid, maybe where you grew up, what your curiosities were, like what kind of kid you were.
Yeah, so I came from a kind of like you, I guess, this environment where my dad never went to the doctor, never took us to the doctor, right? I have this great remembers. I have a twin sister, and we used to ride in the back of my parents' bikes, and we were probably, 4 or 5, and she got her leg caught in the spoke. And it actually broke her ankle. But honestly, my dad's like, you're fine. Probably like 5 days of her like crawling around the house, not being able to walk. He probably took her to the doctor. But that was my dad's nature. I mean, he did not go to the doctor. He sort of felt like, most health stuff, you can take care of yourself. And so he's very anti-medicine in general. And he sort of instilled that in us a little bit. So it's odd that I became a doctor. But what I sort of learned was, wow, maybe I could use this stuff, because he was very knowledgeable. He was a super smart guy. But I thought maybe I need to know a little bit more medicine, but I'm going to be my own doctor, instead of just doing what my dad did, which he'd like, have basal cells on his arm, he'd cut them off with a little knife. And, but maybe I should know a little bit more. So that's what kind of prompted my interest in medicine, was a little bit like I having this dad who I think was sort of a doctor mind, but never trusted doctors and did his own thing. So I think that sort of prompted me, and I went, on this sort of road of pursuing medicine. And then through medical school, I really got more interested in kind of health. And so that's really why I went to more the orthopedic world, because I thought, okay, good, I'm going to deal with healthy people. I want to deal with people who just want to be healthy and fit. And that's the perfect world for me, right? So I went to sports medicine. I worked with football players. I worked with a lot of teams, covering Stanford basketball, and worked with the San Francisco 49ers. So I did medical school at USC, and then went and did a fellowship in sports medicine at Stanford. And that was kind of my world. And then I moved back to Colorado almost 30 years ago now, because I was going to have kids. I needed help. So I needed my mom and dad around. Yeah. I moved back here mostly so grandma and grandpa could help raise my kids, which they did amazingly, right? Because I was so busy working all the time, and they were paramount in my kids' life. I have 5 kids. So I remember when I got pregnant with my 5th kid, my mom's like, we're not doing this again. But they did. So they were like huge. And honestly, that relationship, I never really had a relationship with my grandparents. That relationship between your kids and your parents is so amazing. And it made my kids into really incredible human beings, honestly. I think I'm going to credit them, not me, for how amazing my kids have turned out. And even as my parents aged, they died in their mid-90s, but my kids learned from even that. How do you respect older people? How do you help older people? Like, my dad was brilliantly smart till the day he died, but they learned this, this respect for everybody. And they also learned, like, it was funny watching my, then maybe 14-year-old help my mom, make sure she got in the car, make sure she, was safe. So just watching that relationship and watching, that the mutual sort of respect and love to each other was so huge. And so, so moved back to Colorado, they helped me through my years, and gone to an orthopedic practice here and practiced orthopedic medicine, sports medicine for, 30 years. But honestly, what I realized was my sort of, these are all just healthy people who just want to be super healthy, wasn't really the case. I just saw a lot of people falling apart. And you would see people get hurt, right? And you stick a little steroid in it, you put a little PT, and they never really get better. They always still have some ongoing pain, and you need to stick a little more steroid in it and do a little more PT until finally you do surgery on it, and then you replace the joint. And that was kind of, the the realm of orthopedics. I'm like, this kind of sucks. All I'm doing is seeing people fall apart. I'm not really seeing people who are getting healthy. And so I started learning a little bit more about injuries, and that honestly, this whole kind of paradigm we have of us just deteriorating, which you're into this kind of longevity medicine, and we wouldn't accept that with anything else. We wouldn't accept, our brain just deteriorates, our heart just deteriorates. That's not how we accept it with our joints, that our joints just wear and tear, and that's the way it is, which is untrue. It was not true, And joint disease is an inflammatory disease, just like heart disease and brain disease and metabolic disease. So I started to go back now almost 20 years ago and relearn everything. So kind of relearn orthopedics from a healthy perspective. How do you get somebody healthy and they can make their joints better? So I started, learning nutritional medicine and hormonal medicine and all this stuff. So I went back and got my certification and fellowship in anti-aging and longevity medicine. And then I tried to incorporate that into my orthopedic practice. So, I'd see these patients in these little 15-minute appointments for their knees, and I'd start preaching hormones and nutrition. And partly they didn't really want to hear it because they were there like staring stuck in their knee. And partly there wasn't time, right? You have these 15-minute appointments. All you have time to do is say, yeah, your knee is messed up and let's stick some steroid in. So that prompted us to now, 18 years ago, open this clinic, which is Boulder Longevity Institute. And what I did is all day long, I'd work in my orthopedic practice, and then at night I would come here, and this is where I felt like I actually made people better. In the orthopedic practice, I was just sort of nursing people along until they fell apart. And so I would try and actually have people see me, over here, where I said, okay, come over here, I'll see you for an hour, and we'll talk about all the cool things you can do. And then really now, about 5 years ago, I was like, okay, I can't do both. This is killing me. So I just brought all the orthopedics into our longevity clinic, and we do a lot of regenerative orthopedics now. But I can treat these people more holistically with hormones and nutritional supplements and all, and lifestyle medicine and metabolic health and all the things that we know ultimately are why you fall apart and why you can get better by treating that stuff. So, I could see these patients for an hour and talk to them and talk to them about labs. So people come in with their knee, and I say, listen, let's look at your hormones, right? Because hormones play a huge role in joint pain. So really, Boulder Longevity became kind of a, cellular medicine, functional medicine, and then we would do a lot of regenerative orthopedics too. So, and then interestingly, a lot of patients have, followed me here, right? They sort of realize, wow, okay, if I just keep going with this regular orthopedic care that I'm getting, and my ultimate end stage is to have my hip replaced or my knee replaced. And if I go there, maybe they could do something else, which we always can.
Right. And it's so interesting because that is, a lot of times there's just Band-Aids as we all know, it's like Band-Aids, but I was always the kid that was like, well, why? Like, I want to know why. There's something else that caused that, and there's so many of us that are not as in tune, right? I'm just a very fortunate person. I'm in tuned. And so the fact that you can take that longer time and give people the education of, this is what I'm learning. This is also what I'm seeing in myself, right? This is what I'm seeing in other patients. You can kind of give that patient the bigger picture of what could be happening. And then let's tackle it in a different way, where I would think like in traditional medicine, it's like A, B, and C, right? This is like,
right, well, protocols, how you do things, right?
Right. And nothing wrong with that, it's just,
you have to do that stuff sometimes, honestly, right? There's nothing better. If you break your leg, you need an orthopedic surgeon. If you have a horrible infection, you need an antibiotic, if you have a gunshot wound to your abdomen, you need a good surgeon. So
right, totally.
There's a place for traditional medicine. It's just not for most of the things we deal with.
Right, which is interesting. So what is one of the things that you're most proud of? Like, I don't want you to think too much. I just want, what was the first thing that came to your head when I said that about opening up your new clinic?
I think it's honestly that I've been able to actually teach people, convert people, right? Because the big dilemma we always have doing this type of medicine is insurance doesn't cover it, right? So people are always looking for what insurance covers. So the fact that people valued, they actually came to me from this orthopedic practice after I left, even knowing that they could see somebody else there and get it paid for by insurance. They're like, oh, wait, she does have something more to offer. It is worth paying for her. I really, need that kind of care. So I think it's the fact that I could actually convince people that, this is stuff that your insurance isn't going to pay for. It doesn't matter. You need to be healthy. And so that's taken a lot of education, right? We have to teach people that, you can't rely on your insurance for your health care. It has to be you. You're going to have to, put money away for it. And you're going to have to, have a good health savings account, all those things, because you can't rely on your insurance to pay for the things you need. But the fact that I've been able to actually build a hugely, really a more profitable, more busy practice than I even had at my orthopedic clinic, which is, very, very busy, has been, really heartwarming to me.
Right. And, sometimes, and I feel like you're this type of person, a very intuitive person. So sometimes when we have just this knowing and this understanding, and knowing how Danielle talks about you, I know that you're kind of part of this group. This is why I'm asking. But sometimes we see the bigger picture and we see where things can go.
Right.
And we can't always explain it. Right. We can't always explain it to people. Have you found, like, in the beginning of kind of creating the clinic in your head, that you were running up against any walls, or was it the way that you really pictured it in your head? And was it like when those doors opened, they just kept opening and opening when you're in the flow? Like, that's one of my favorite things when we get this big picture, and then it's like, okay, I'm stepping through that door. Sometimes you have to turn right. Sometimes you have to turn left. Sometimes you get stuck and it's like, where am I supposed to go? And then sometimes it's just like a fast pass through all the doors. And it's like, okay, this is so cool. This is what I'm supposed to do. Can you take us through a little bit of that journey?
Yeah, honestly, it was so hard for me to step out of that practice, right? It was busy. I was scared. And it took, it really took finally, things happen in your life where they were horrible at the time. And you think, and you're like, oh my God, this is just the end of everything. But like 3 things happened all at once, where my parents both got sick at the same time. I was in this busy practice with very unsupportive partners who didn't really like that I didn't want to push the surgery and things like that. And one day, I was trying to take care of my sick parents or my aging parents. I was trying to keep up with this busy practice. And one day, one of my partners pulled me aside. He goes, you don't really belong here if you're going to keep doing medicine. We don't do medicine here. We do orthopedics. And I thought, okay, well, this is obviously not where I belong. This is obviously a sign to me that I need to move on. And it was really hard because I was really, I had a busy, successful practice. So it was very, very hard. And it really took that push where you're like, Jesus, this is end the game. I can't work with these people anymore. My life is falling apart. I'm overwhelmed. And now I'm trying to work with people who are horribly unsupportive. Even as my parents were dying, they're like, there was zero support. And my husband's an entrepreneur. He's more like, Danny, her husband, he's an entrepreneur. And those people are willing to take chances, right? You have to.
Right.
And so, my husband's like, you'll be okay. I promise you'll be okay. Step off, do it, dive in. We will be okay. And so from there, really honestly, as soon as I left that practice and started focusing on what I loved and what I wanted to do, it took off. It was always kind of struggling a little bit because I never was vested into it. And when we took that leap, where I just said, other practice is done, and I moved on, it just started growing leaps and bounds. And, and so it really, like you said, it really was like the doors just started opening as soon as I put my focus to what I really believed in.
Right. And I love that so much. And I always say to people, sometimes you just need one person to believe in you.
Right.
And it helps you be able to take that leap, even when it's scary. Right. So I love that you have, that husband that has that entrepreneur spirit that's like, you can do it. And it's a lot of times, people think they need an army around them to do it. And it's really just that one person that you need to kind of.
Yeah, we won't make it. It's okay if we're not, doing this, but, doing it, we'll still make it. And so that was, without that person, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But I didn't have a whole lot of other, a lot of other people who were supportive. We started out in a little one room, office with just me, seeing patients. And, I think one staff person, one of my medical assistants who would come with me. But you're right. It's like, if you have that one person who says, you can do this, it's okay. It's amazing what you can do.
Right. So, and I do want to take it a little bit to, women's health. As you said, you've done a lot of things, but as you kind of, obviously you're a woman as well. And as we get older, it's really interesting, traditional, this is what's going to happen to your body. These are the things that are happening because you're going into, different changes, and you just take it. It's like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And as I've learned, as my body changed, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And now I need to talk to someone. And going to, my traditional doctors, it's been really interesting to be like, no, I know that that's not what's happening to me, but it's hard to explain to a doctor who's educated, right? But I'm like, no, I'm not trying to argue with you. I know that's not what's happening to my body. It has to be something else. So can you take us down a little bit of what you've done with your practice in that, in that sense with your patients and your own journey?
Right. I think the big thing is that we're sort of expected to sort of just wither away and die, right? That's kind of the accepted paradigm. So, things like replacing hormones are always a little bit like, I still get this a lot where people are like, well, we're supposed to lose our hormones. It's okay because that's sort of the what life designed for us. And, until you go to your doctor, you're complaining that I can't sleep and I have no sex drive and I can't build muscle and I got belly fat. And my hair is falling out, and they're like, well, that's just aging. It's just aging, as opposed to, it's because you have zero hormones left, and that's affecting every aspect of your life. And then, and even if you say that to your doctor, like, well, how are my hormones? I go, yeah, of course your hormones are dropping because you're getting older. And that's just what happens when you get older. And the big issue was, remember, we were really designed to bear children and then die. I mean, that was kind of our purpose in life as women is to have babies. And so the whole thing that we kind of got shoved under the carpet once we couldn't have babies anymore, there wasn't really reasons to, from a genetic perspective, once there's not a reason to be alive, which is you can't reproduce anymore from a genetic perspective, there's not very much reason to be alive. But we're not in that same world anymore, right? There's a lot of reasons to be alive besides having babies. Mm-hmm. And so we needed to shift that paradigm, but women still, and this is probably the biggest thing I get, number one, well, this is just what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to drop your hormones. It's okay. No, we're really supposed to stay vital and healthy and young so that we can continue to be, successful humans who can contribute to society, because we have all this knowledge base, right, that we've learned through the years that we shouldn't just be shoved under carpet. People shouldn't be retired at 65 years old, right? There's tons of knowledge there, but people are kind of withering away, and and once you lose all these things that are sort of keeping you vital and healthy, your impact on the world does get less. So we have to get rid of that paradigm that we're supposed to just shrivel away and die, and that's that's just normal. We also have to get rid of that sort of shift of thinking of, well, hormones are bad, they cause cancer, because that's completely and utterly false and disproven. So you're really fighting these unfortunate, rules that are so wrong.
Mm-hmm. So one question, because I'm always fascinated with this, because I'm 51, right, and I really haven't had, I changed my entire lifestyle, and I shouldn't say entire, but I've always been fit. I've always eaten pretty clean, always drink water. I've stopped drinking alcohol because it wasn't working with me anymore. I tried. I was like, come on, but I'm all or nothing. So I know myself. It's not like I can have 2 glasses of wine and be like, that's it. That doesn't happen. It's a bottle and a half. And then, the next day and the next week and a half, I was still feeling it. And I was like, I can't do this. I have important things to do. This is weighing me down and I don't like this. So I was like, okay, I'm going to say goodbye. But one of the interesting things, because in circles and women friends, we have all these conversations, and I love that people do. I mean, I've always been that friend that's like, we're going to talk about this stuff. I don't care if it's taboo or you're uncomfortable. We're talking about it. I want to know if your vagina's dry, and I want to know if it's going to happen. And they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about this. I was like, we're talking about it. So that is me. But one of the things that has been really interesting is my sister, who's a couple years younger, is probably we're probably closer in the same cycle, I want to say, in our lives, with our hormones. And so she went and has done hormone replacement because she was having all these side effects. And I said to her, I've been using some supplements because I've been working with a naturopath, and I haven't needed any hormone replacement. Now, I've been very sensitive. I took the pill for a very short period of time. And I'm talking because I know a couple people that I was telling them I was going to be on the podcast. They're like, can you ask some certain questions? And I was like, oh, these are funny because this is actually things that always go through my mind and I always talk about. But so I'm really sensitive. As I said, I know everything, but I'm super sensitive to hormone, anything that's like not in like with me, right? That how my natural body does. So like I couldn't take the pill. I took many different ones in those ages and I was like, forget it. I'm just going to do more natural stuff and always did that. And it always worked. So I've taken like evening primrose, I take Vitex, I take, these different supplements. I get my checks, but I've really not had, other than that period of time before I started taking the supplements, my ADD started going like wonky. And I was like, oh no. And I don't take meds. I really use supplements and homeopathy. So it was very interesting for me, when she went on and she was like, okay, now I'm feeling, and I was like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I don't. So are there women, long story short, or long question short, are there women that you have found that really don't need any hormone supplements? Or have you found that it really is important to supplement at some point for a woman?
Yeah, I think that, obviously the supplements are working for you right now. You're young, you're 51. I think it'll work forever now. So as your hormones get lower, you will not be able to get effective replacement with just taking supplements. In an early drop, you can use supplements to enhance production. But at some point, you get ovarian failure, your ovaries are not going to do anything unless you get the hormone back. You need to get the hormone back. Your ovaries are not going to produce them. They're just not. So, and 51 is still pretty young. So that happens some people in their 30s, some people in their 40s, right. Some people 50s, some people in their 60s. But it's really important because I think that the earlier you can catch that drop, because sometimes it happens really rapidly, all of a sudden, things kind of decline, then we know that hormone replacement earlier rather than later has more benefits. There's more cardiovascular benefits, there's more brain benefits, there's more bone benefits. So have I ever seen a woman who I could actually just get their hormones controlled with supplements as they get older now?
Okay, interesting.
And I've been doing this for a long time. So yeah. I think that you're just one of the fortunate people whose hormones are holding out longer, right? You still have active ovarian function. So you remember these are substituting, they're giving you some of the same benefits of hormones. Are they as good as hormones? Depends. You really have to look at your hormone levels because honestly, even if you feel great, I never had a symptom of menopause ever. I had my last baby at 45. So I didn't go through menopause till late, but I never had a symptom of menopause. I never had hot flashes. I never had brain fog. I never felt yucky. I started doing hormones solely because I know that they're going to protect me from my brain, my bone, my heart all failing, right? And so I based it solely on my labs, even though, I could certainly treat people symptomatically with their hormones and say, wow, this is obviously estrogen deficiency or progesterone deficiency based on but I treated myself based on my labs. And when my labs were showing this is actually a sub-therapeutic level of estrogen for your brain and for your bone, then I started replacing. So I do think it's important to look at your hormones and see, because it may well be you feel fine, you feel great.
Right.
Does that mean you have enough estrogen for your brain to function well or your heart to function well? No.
Okay, interesting. And then there's also that whole thing that people always say, like, if you don't do it at a certain time, you never can go back. Is that true? Because I've heard that kind of back.
It's never too late to start hormones. But what we do know, great study out of Stanford that did show that if you could catch people earlier and treat them ongoing, the benefits were more substantial, particularly for heart. So heart seemed very impacted by that. Now, it wasn't to say that it wasn't still beneficial later. It was, but not as beneficial as if you started earlier. So I do think it's important to get your hormones checked and see if they are dropping. And if they are dropping, that you do treat, as opposed to taking supplements and say, I feel fine. There's lots of things. I mean, you can feel fine and have horrible high blood pressure. You can feel fine and have horrible lipids, right? They're still going to kill you. The same thing's true about hormones. I think you still need levels that we know equate to overall health. And you don't know that when you're taking just something.
Interesting. Okay. I love that. Now, on the flip side, for men, like, what are you finding for men in your practice that you're like, these are the things that traditionally is not talked about, right? We don't tell men they should be doing things. Can you take us through that a little bit? Yeah,
I think men have been certainly probably a little bit, the realization is now becoming more and more doctors are looking at testosterone levels. We hear the commercials on the radio all the time, right? The ED commercials have become paramount, but look, men come in to see us when they have erectile dysfunction.
Right.
It's sort of late stage, and it's not always hormonal causes of that. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's metabolic problems. Sometimes it's vascular problems. There's a lot of reasons for erectile dysfunction, but that's usually what brings them in. Whereas women come in because they're getting sluggish, fat, brain fog. Men almost always come in because of sexual issues. So, but that's oftentimes the late stage of the game. What we need to recognize with men is that one of the earliest sign of testosterone dropping is a little bit more anxiety and depression. So when you hear that kind of grumpy old man, that's sort of the nature of low testosterone. But we can see this in young people, right? So you're seeing a lot of young males now who have a lot of anxiety. And why is that? Well, we're seeing a rash. I mean, a rash, at least 30% of men under the age of 30 who have low testosterone. And I don't know why. Is it environmental influences, right? Is it because we have too many toxins? Was it COVID knocking out a lot of issues with it? That we took everybody out of a social environment and put them behind their computers, and video games, and people aren't outside as much and doing all those things that raise testosterone. I don't know. I'm sure it's multifactorial to that. But it's really important to realize that the first signs have nothing to do with sexual function. That sexual function is a late game. It has to do with the mental issues. So when you see these people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s who are starting to get more anxiety and depression and just not feeling like they want to get out in the world, that's oftentimes testosterone deficiency. So we need to recognize that and start testing people at younger ages to see if this is something that needs to be corrected. And sometimes you can do things to just stimulate their own function. So a younger guy, you don't have to give testosterone. Sometimes you can just give them supplements or secretagogues, things that cause their own testicles to just work a little bit better, right? So we don't have to just throw testosterone on the board, but oftentimes testosterone can be life-saving to guys in that state. So I have a very low threshold to check testosterone in my males. And I will tell you that we are definitely seeing low levels in very young people.
It's interesting.
So I think the realization is becoming a little bit more now. We get to 50s and 60s, and guys are coming to the doctors with ED that they look at testosterone. The other problem is they don't treat testosterone until it's critically low, right? So what's considered a low testosterone is critically low, not optimally. So if you look at, and we've done this with a lot of lab values, is that we've just changed our scale of what's normal, because a normal testosterone isn't normal anymore. So honestly, what was normal 10 years ago, 20 years ago, now, we just keep changing our scale. Okay, well, now nobody has that, so let's just change our norm to here. We've done that with other labs, like since COVID. We've seen a really big change in some of the vascular dysfunction markers. And so we just changed our range. We said, okay, well, nobody has those values anymore. Let's just change our range. So instead of looking at why we have these abnormalities, we're just changing our lab values. So we have to really be looking at labs in a much more skeptical fashion and looking at what's optimal for testosterone. Like, a guy will not be treated for testosterone until their total testosterone is less than 250. That's critically low. I mean, you need usually above 600 for a guy to feel good, and you have to look at other things too.
Right.
So I think that the poor guys get sort of, the only time anyone pays attention to them is sexually.
Right. Which is, that's the thing. It's always interesting and how we see society and everything shift, right? It's very much now into women's health and women, which is great. But I always feel like, why can't we just be even? Like, why does everything have to go? I mean, again, I'm all or nothing. So that is, I understand that whole mentality, but it's like, if we can kind of just think about, as humans, what are the key things for us to function and be at our best now? And it's always really funny because it's always like, drink water, eat healthy, exercise, take care of yourself, right? There's always the top things that someone that's not healthy is like, yeah, that's easy for you. That's not easy, right? That's not easy for me. And it's not easy to get healthy if we are not in tune to our own bodies as well, right? So you keep pushing things away because it's like, I don't feel like dealing with that. I don't feel like dealing with that. There's some people that go through things that they're like, okay, I need to change it because I don't have a choice. And so if you can kind of talk about some of the top kind of non-traditional things that you really have done for yourself and that you always will say to your patients, like, you might not hear this, but this is something that I think is really important. You should be adding or taking out of your daily life.
So let's back up to your comment about, it's not easy that we need to sleep, we need to eat well, and we, need to exercise. And people are like, well, that's easy for you to say. Remember, if I don't have any hormones, so if I have no progesterone, I'm not going to sleep. I can tell you, you are not going to sleep. You're going to have anxiety. Your brain's going to race. You're going to stay awake all night long. So, and if you have no testosterone, you can go to the gym and try and work out, you'll build no muscle. You'll get frustrated. You just get sore. You have nothing, benefits to it. So you're not going to want to go keep working out. If I have, think about PMS. So, as we get menopausal, we're kind of like PMS all the time. We have low progesterone, we have high estrogen. And so I'm hungry all the time. I crave sugar. I crave carbs. And we're telling people to eat well. But I tell people it isn't all about willpower. And sometimes it is about hormones. So sometimes you have to go back and say, kind of to your point, it's something that's enough. Well, maybe that person, if I get their progesterone on board, get their testosterone up, they're actually going to start enjoying working out. Now they see muscle building, right? Or they're going to be able to sleep at night. So now they feel healthier and better and they can exercise. And now they don't have those food cravings anymore because they've normalized their hormones. So I did have to go back to, it isn't just willpower that is controlling these things. And we have to look at those things. So obviously I preach all the time that there is nothing more important than exercise, and particularly resistance training. So cardio exercise is not enough. You need to strength train. You need to have muscle. So, I preach that a lot. But I think the most overlooked things in our field are the things that we don't counsel our patients about. It is exactly what I talked about with the low testosterone. You know what the top 3 predictors are of whether you'll die? It has nothing to do with your cholesterol level. It doesn't have anything to do with your exercise. The top 3 predictors are, do you have social connection? If you don't have social connection, your likelihood of dying is almost equal to smokers. So how many people don't have social connections anymore because they get older, right? Or you've got one friend that you do things with. You actually need social connections around different age groups. You need different people around you. That's why I encourage people to keep working. And the girl who works at my front desk is 75 years old. She's the best employee in the world. She comes to work every day. She never complains. She can interact with anybody because she has so much life experience. Nobody's mean to her. And she loves this medicine. She loves what we do. That's why she decided to work here. So why are we having 75-year-olds who are sitting at home doing nothing when they could be hugely beneficial in the workforce? And now she's around all these different age groups because we have people in their 20s working here, right? And we've got, people in their 50s, and we have patients of all age groups. So she gets all this interaction. One of the things my parents lived so long is because they took care of 5 kids, right?
Right.
And so that's number 1. Number 2, if you look at kind of predictors, is sense of purpose. And so again, we have to have sense of purpose. So I had seen these people retire. I'm like, oh, what are you going to do? And like, oh, I'm going to, travel and do all these things. Okay, well, that's probably good for a while, but it actually isn't a purpose. So yes, learning about the world is good, but you actually need to have a true, where you could say, my purpose is to change the world. I'm going to go around the world and preach this or whatever. But you actually need to have a definitive purpose. So people lose that purpose. They quit the workforce, right? Where you can very much define what is my goals every day. And they're anxious to get out of the workforce and just have this life to themselves. But unfortunately, it's not healthy. You actually need to have purpose. So unfortunately, I hate to tell you guys, but you have to keep working. Yeah. Because that's one, and I will keep working until the day I die because that gives me a sense of purpose. Now, can you take more time off? Can you work less? Sure. But you still need that sense of purpose. And then number 3, and these again, bigger predictors to you guys than exercise or eating right, is being in nature. And so again, the top 3 things have nothing to do with all this healthy stuff. And they're nothing we preach. We don't tell people, you got to be around trees. You got to have your feet on the grass. We don't tell people that stuff, right? We're looking at their hormones and we're looking at all these things. And we're making sure they're eating right. And I'm telling my people to raise it since exercise. And how often am I counseling them? Who did you interact with today? Who did you talk to today? Did you get outside and, hug a tree? Nobody counsels, even when I look at the best functional medicine doctors, they're not counseling on this stuff that's so critically important. And so we need to sort of shift our paradigm a little bit into not what is the next greatest supplement or drug, but how do we just change our vision a bit more, right?
I love that. And when you were saying that, I was like, oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. Oh, thank gosh.
Well, you look 20 years younger than you are.
Thank you. I feel it. So that's wonderful. So we will go back to that last question, but I do want to, because there is also something that's always been on my mind with blood work and hormones. And so since you just talked about the 3 things that I think are so important for people, because those things you can do, those things people can do. Right. Well, those things are Yeah, those are doable, right?
Doable.
Those are doable. And so, as you said, right, going to the gym, if you're feeling crap, that's hard, right? Because that's
Right.
like you don't feel the way, and then you beat yourself up. And there's so
Right.
many people that you talk to that you hear that, and you're like, okay, I get it. When people are getting their blood work, is it true that hormones fluctuate? They can fluctuate within a day. So it's really sometimes hard to grasp on that. And so there's so much more to go in than just those labs to read it and be like, okay, this is where you are. And so that's, if you can kind of take us through that before we talk about all the good stuff that, you want to talk, after the third question I asked you, but like, what do people say? Because there's been skeptics that are like, well, I'm not getting my hormones because I've been told that it doesn't matter because they could change within a day or within an hour or whatever this. And I'm like, well, no, it's really important just to get them. I mean, I get them done. And as I said, like traditional medicine I use for certain things, but I really like the path that I'm on. Mm-hmm. And I do get my blood work checked because of multi different reasons.
Right. So will your hormones fluctuate by the day, by the hour? Yes. But you're still going to get a pretty good, even with a snapshot, you're still going to get a sense of what's going on. If I have somebody with zero testosterone, which sounds crazy, but about most of you women over 50 are going to have zero testosterone. So, is it all of a sudden going to fly up to a nice, healthy, free testosterone 6? No. So we do know, and we also can look at ratios of things, like an estrogen progesterone ratio tells us a lot. In a healthy world, you want a progesterone estrogen ratio of like 150 to 100 to 1. So if I start seeing people become estrogen dominant, that's going to still be the same throughout the day, right? And especially as women start, not cycling as much, but otherwise you need to try and get the hormones done at the same time of the day and the same time of the month to kind of give you a nice thing. But then you can dictate it. But the other thing you can do is we know by far the best way to look at hormones would be looking at 24-hour urine metabolites of hormones. So what we found is there's a test called the Dutch test that actually you pee on a little piece of paper 4 times throughout the day. And what they found is that 4 times throughout the day still gave you about the same measurements as if you collected your urine for 24 hours and sent it in. So we could actually do this little 4-spot test that gave us a sort of a snapshot of 24 hours. But also, when you look at urine, one of the things you're getting is metabolites. I can see how you're metabolizing these hormones. So that's important because estrogen can metabolize into 3 different metabolites. One's really good and 2 are not. So if now I look at your hormones and they're all going into a bad metabolite, I can say, wow, we need to really work on the metabolism of these hormones, not just give you more hormones, right? So we can actually look at how the testosterone is metabolizing. We can look at, these different markers in your urine that we can't do in blood. So I think it's also really important to look at how people are metabolizing things. When people are all, digging out on genomics, so let's get all of our genetic profile. Genomics actually means something, but really the scheme of things, once you have a gene, it gets epigenetically changed by what I eat, what I'm exposed to, what I'm thinking. So that gene gets epigenetically modified. It encodes for a protein. The protein then gets or modified, changed by what I eat, what I do, how I think, into a metabolite. So ultimately, what really matters is the metabolites that are being excreted, because that's what happened at the end game. So even if I have a really bad gene, if I don't have this metabolite that corresponds to that, it doesn't really matter that I have that bad gene. So what we're looking at a lot more is what we call metabolomics. We're looking at as many metabolites as we can to predict health and lifestyle. And been working with a guy named Dr. Dane Goodnow, who is an amazing scientist. And he has a machine that can now look at like 500,000 metabolites. I mean, too much, but we're trying to narrow that down to what are the top metabolites we can look at for longevity. So that's really when we get better and better at this, we'll look at how you're metabolizing everything and what that's coming to. But right now we do have very easy ways of doing that, at least a simple basic test like this urine test, this Dutch test. So that's sort of a little bit more advanced way of looking at hormones. But I can still get a ton of information from just a snapshot, just a point of time, just by looking at ratios, looking at, okay, even if tomorrow your hormones are going to be a little bit better than this, they're in the toilet. I mean, there's women who have no testosterone, no progesterone, who have sky high estrogen, which is the first thing that happens when you start getting perimenopausal.
Interesting. It's also fascinating. The human body is really, it's such an interesting thing.
Cool. Yeah.
It really is cool. I mean, and I could talk about it all day long because there's so many inconsistencies and all these different things, the way it works. So when
you talk about like your whole sort of ability to sense things, I mean, even that we're now learning there's this whole, energy field, this quantum, this quantum biology. How do light and energies, how do the way you feel, why do you meet somebody and you immediately like them, right?
Yes.
It's actually these energies that our cells are modified by. So there's not woo-woo. It's actually, now that we're understanding quantum physics and quantum biology, we're like, wow, we can actually transfer energies from one person to another and look at a cellular level and see a change.
And I 100% agree with that. And when we get off the recording, I want to bring something up to you because it's so interesting. And it's not woo, but so many people think it's woo. But like I've always been that since I was little. Like I can feel people. I can feel everything.
Can take this energy. They can feel this energy, and they change, and it sends messages to you, right? Mm-hmm. So we very much now are proving that. That's why light. Why you can do so much with light. Or sound, right? Mm-hmm. Why can sound heal or light heal? Those all have to do now. We are seeing at a mitochondrial level that that you can change the mitochondrial energy production by light.
Right.
So all this stuff now we're catching. Science is catching up, and we're figuring it out.
It's so cool. It really is so fascinating. So going back to the other question. So what are like some things that you will tell people other than your 3 tips, like when they come in, that maybe it's a supplement, maybe it's, something in food that you're like, if you're not getting this, if you can kind of tell the listeners just a little bit, like your 1 go or 2 go-to things that you're like, this will make a little bit of a difference in your life if you start adding.
Well, probably the biggest thing that's going to be life-changing to most people is protein. Yeah. There's very few of us eat enough protein, especially women. Uh-huh. Men a little bit better, but especially women. And, the old kind of rule of thumb is too low. You really need a gram of protein per pound of lean body mass, which means somebody like me needs 120, 130 grams of protein. I mean, it's a lot, and you have to eat a lot of protein. You have to intake a fair amount. But protein is so critical. When you look at all these people who are doing this whole thing with Ozempic, and these people are like, well, Ozempic makes you lose muscle. Ozempic does not make you lose muscle. In fact, it actually pushes glucose into the muscle. It was designed to help build muscle. The problem is if you don't eat, you lose muscle. So we've got to get people eating more protein, and especially my women, and especially as they get older. Oh my gosh, you look at what these women are eating when they're getting older, and I count up, you're like 50 grams of protein. So number 1 kind of rule of thumb is start counting your grams of protein, start counting your macronutrients, and make sure you're getting up in that 100 gram, 120 gram range of protein. That's going to probably take using some protein drinks or stuff, unless you have good enough appetite to do that. If you're a vegetarian, it's really difficult, or a vegan, it's very difficult to do that. So you really have to work hard at it. So that's kind of number 1. Number 2, we talked about you've got a resistance exercise. So that's the first thing I kind of get everybody going on. And then there's just basic supplements everybody needs. That if I were to just say, without even looking at your labs, without even looking at your hormones, there are basic supplements everybody needs. Everybody needs magnesium. 90% of the population is low in magnesium. It's been grown out of our soil. We can't get it from our diet anymore. 90% of the population needs D3 with a K2 because they need to work synergistically with each other. So you do D3, K2, magnesium. You need a good B complex of vitamins, right? And then you've got to have an adequate choline source, which I tell people that's why I want you to do that is food, which is usually eggs. Is by far the best source there. So, so if you do those kind of basic supplements, and then I'll add to that like a fish oil or a krill oil, and a omega to the mix. So if you kind of did those basic sort of supplements, and some big multivitamin, you're going to get by for a lot of people on just the supplement regimen. And then I argue with you that I think everybody needs to get hormones optimized because I think that's such a key player to protection. Like I said, you're looking at how you feel now. Look at the prevention of the disease because that's where you have to be focusing on. So you really have to keep hormones optimized, or I don't think you can age well. I really don't. I mean, there's some people who can. Obviously, there's always the exceptions to the rule. Right. My mom never took hormones, but she did. She ended up with osteoporosis. She actually died after a pelvic fracture. So she, there's things that she could have way prevented, even, living to 95. Her brain started to go, her bones went, can we prevent that? So at 95, we're not frail little people. I think the only way to do that is hormone process.
All right. Now that's you're making me think. So I love that. Okay. So last question. What are you looking so excited about for the future? When you think of what you're building, like what is that like excitement, that first thing that pops into your mind that you're like, yes, this is what excites me every day to get up and, jump to work?
there's, so number one is in this field of longevity medicine, all of a sudden there's this interest in it, right? And what that's driving is research, because we can, I use a lot of peptide therapies, things like that. We have all these animal studies, and we have a lot of N of one data from all those doctors who are doing it, saying, well, this works great, blah, blah, blah. But we need really research. So we're really seeing now, like Northwestern just opened a whole longevity lab. So we're actually seeing the big institutions now jumping on board, because if we have more data, more research, we're going to be able to much better refine this, right? Right now, we can say, well, this should work. It works in mice. It works in rats. It should work in us. It appears to work in us, because when we do it to people, we're seeing improvements in their labs. We're seeing improvement in their functions. But we need the big data to really prove it, right? So that's happening. And I love that. I belong to this big longevity docs network, and it's probably about 200 of us from across the world now. And we're compelling, we're putting together data so we can actually prove this stuff. So I love that. I love that now we're seeing this interest, which is going to drive research. Once we have research, we can say definitively, okay, rapamycin's a great drug, take it or not, right? We need that. Right now I can make my best guesses, but I don't have a lot of research backing to support it. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things. And then number two is where AI starts fitting in, right? Because, you can, AI replace doctors to a lot of extent. It can, because, you can now take all of your labs, all of your genetics, right? And you can put it into an AI system, and it will spit you out and say, you need this and this and this, right? Now, a lot of times need to go back. I have patients who do that, right? And I welcome it. And then you go back and you refine it with them. And, so I think there's always going to be a little bit of touch of refinement. But I love that AI is helping us so much. I can take these really complex cases that I'm like, oh my God, I can't figure out why this person is not doing what I think they should do. And I can feed in every something that I have them on, every drug I have them on, and all of their labs. And AI sometimes comes up with an idea for me, like, shit, I didn't think about that, right? Well, I love where AI can improve our capabilities here. I think it's huge. I love it for research. It can be so helpful there. So I really do love where AI is coming in. And then the third thing is exactly what you and I just talked about was, what we're learning in the quantum world. That like the mitochondria, you have this weird thing where they have these little iron atoms, and the iron atoms actually spin based on the light that they're exposed to. That kind of stuff is fascinating. And that we can actually prove that, that being in the sunlight has such a big influence on us. And we can prove it from a scientific level. So this whole getting the quantum world mixed with the medical world is huge. So I love that. I love where we're going with this. It's so much fun.
Yeah. I mean, the AI thing, when people are always like, it's going to take over, I think the people that know how to use AI are the ones that are going to excel in their field. And I really believe that.
Putting together, right? It's going to be putting
using
together. You still need, like last time I'll look at, something, I'm like, well, okay, yeah, that's not quite right? But it's still not, and maybe it will get that good, right? I will say it is pretty good. There's no way any one person can know what AI can figure out, right? There's no way. I will never be able to accumulate all that data and put it together, So I can put in 3 years of labs on somebody and say, this is what's been happening to them. And it will say, probably this. I could never do that, right? So I love that. I love that it can help me with these things. I don't think we should be scared of it. I think we should keep embracing it, but with caution of how we're using it.
Yes. Thank you for listening to Don't Die Curious. If this episode sparked a question, leave a review and share it with a friend. You want to connect or suggest a topic? Just look me up. I am Juliet Hahn on Instagram and LinkedIn. Until next time, stay curious and keep asking those questions. You don't know where it's going to lead you.